I'm so excited to be here and to have this conversation. This is a really exciting time for me. I've never published a book, so I'm just really happy to be here and happy to have your support here in this space and online. I want to introduce my colleague, Vernice Miller-Travis, who is an exceptional person. And I'm just so excited that she agreed to be here today with us.
And I'm here because I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you. She's awesome. I get to work with her very closely, but she is a founder of We Act for Environmental Justice, which is a nonprofit that advocates for environmental justice nationally, and an executive vice president at Metropolitan Group, which is a consulting company that a social change agency that focuses on environmental sustainability, public health, and the third thing, and social justice. And we are here in the Metropolitan Group offices in DC. So shout out to my MG and all my colleagues for joining us today. So today we're just going to have a very open conversation. I'm going to walk everybody through a couple of questions. And I want to invite everyone who's here and everyone who's streaming to participate in the conversation if you want to, completely optional. But I just want to take this time to hold space for us to have a dialogue about religion and spirituality in a safe space that's not about judgment or shame. So I hope that this will be that space. And these are also the questions that I've personally wrestled with in the process of creating the book. So hopefully this will give you a better idea of how we got here. So I'm going to start by asking myself a question, and then I'm going to pose the question to Ms. Vernice.
Can we first just say the name of this book, Prayers in Reverse?
Yes.
And show this book on the screen. She has actually written a book. Oh my God. Okay, Kayla did this. So this is what we're going to talk about tonight.
Yeah. Thank you. And yes, thank you. I want to start by talking about my spiritual background. My parents were both raised in Seventh-day Adventist Church. And if you don't know what that is, shout out to those in the audience who do know. It's a Protestant Christian religion that focuses on a literal interpretation of the Bible. And there are a lot of details that I could go into, but I'll just leave it at that and say that it was a very important part of my upbringing as a child. Our family was very, very religious growing up. And so it was like a huge part of how I learned to be a human being in the world, how I learned to treat other people and to think about, purpose and things like that. And so I really, in this process of transitioning from that religion that I was given as a child into my current, more hard to define set of beliefs, I had to come back to the role that my mother played in really inspiring me and helping me to, feel the freedom to explore different ways of thinking. So I wrote this poem that I'm going to share with you now, really as an homage to her. And I think she might be here on the Zoom call with us. So hi, Mom. This poem, like all the poems in the book,
hi Kayla.
can
Sorry,
be read
I
from the top
a little
to
slow.
to the top. So that's why the book is called Prayers in Reverse. And I'm going to read it both ways now. This is called For My Mother. Mom, you were always my strength. You gave me a roadmap for life. I followed your example like you knew more than I ever could. I still believe your words carry sunlight. Your thoughts water seeds in my mind. You will always be important, though I know you are not always right. You are not always right. I know. though you will always be important in my mind. Your thoughts water seeds. Your words carry sunlight. I still believe you knew more than I ever could. I followed your example like a roadmap for life. You gave me strength. You were always my mom. So thank you. Thank you. So now I would like to pose a question to Vernice and then to the audience. And I want to ask you, what was your introduction to God and religion? And was religion important to you and your family?
So yes, very, very important, central. My grandmother was Haitian, and she left Haiti to marry a Syrian person and then moved to the Bahamas. So Haiti and the Bahamas are very, very, very close by. And my father was born in the Bahamas, and his family, and most of his family still live there. But she was a devout Catholic, and my father was raised as a devout Catholic. And then he met my mother. My mother's family were also devout Catholics. So I'm from generations of Black Catholics, and people tend to think that there are no Black Catholics. In Maryland and in the DMV, this is sort of the mother lode of Black Catholics. Maryland is a predominantly Catholic state. The first Catholic church established in the United States was established in Maryland. It's actually in Bowie. They just found a bunch of formerly enslaved people buried back behind this church in the town that I live in. And my mother's from Maryland. So the history of the Catholic Church and Black folk is a very interesting and entwined history. But as a child, the church, when I was growing up in the 60s, the church was deeply committed to social justice, but it had a huge history of racism and racial segregation. Of course, is largely a huge contributor to the transatlantic slave trade. The Pope used to, and the bishops used to bless the slave ships as they were leaving European ports to go to Africa and then to come back. And they would pray for the safety of the ships and of the crew, but not think at all about the lives that they were destroying and the cultures that they were raping and pillaging. So, but I didn't know that when I was a little kid, right? And I had this great priest, Father White, who was our parish priest in Harlem, Central Harlem, where I grew up. My mother went to Catholic school, middle school at the church that I grew up in. And again, the church was deeply involved in the civil rights movement, but sort of had amnesia about all the other things in the history of the church. But they showed up, right, in large fashion. And so it was very important. And I went to church every Sunday. My parents, oddly enough, had kind of stopped going to church, but both of them went to Catholic school. My dad went all the way through, spoke Latin, and but had some trauma around the church. And the trauma was he thought he was going to be, so he and my grandmother moved to Miami, Florida. And then my dad moved to Harlem as a part of the first wave of the Great Migration, moved to New York, to Harlem in August of 1929. And you know what happened in October of 1929. So that was not the move. He didn't know that. But he moved because he was a very, very, very bright and talented student. And he thought he was going to be one of the first Black priests ordained in Florida. So he applied to go to college. When he finished high school, he applied to go to college. There was one Catholic college in Florida at the time called St. Augustine. St. Augustine still exists. The city of St. Augustine is named after the college and the university. And he sends his application and they promptly write him back, "We don't accept college students." And I really think that he never actually got over that. And his whole life he spent trying to do different things to make up for being so rejected by something that he believed so strongly in. But that didn't stop him from sending myself right up into the church. So, so yeah, I grew up with a very, very, very strong belief, and almost everything that I hold on to and stand on today is from the social gospel that I was taught as a child in the Catholic Church. We'll have further discussion about how I left the church, but that's sort of where it started.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Real quickly, what happened in 1929?
The Great Depression, the stock market crash in October, and my dad moved to New York in like June or July.
Okay.
And nobody knew that was coming. But the last place you would want to be was in New York City, right? And the last place you would want to be was in New York City as a Black person, as an immigrant, right? That just was not the move. And so he had lots of stories about how they struggled. And to this day, I cannot eat lima beans. I cannot eat a lot of things that they survived on. He would buy a nickel's worth of beans, right? And a group of friends from the Caribbean would share a pot of beans, and he still loved lima beans, and I still hate them to this day. Because he, like many people who survived the Depression, they kept that, those survival things, the things that they ate, the way that they cleaned their homes, the way that they saved and scrimped everything. So if you go into my basement, you will find almost everything I've ever owned is somewhere in my house. Because you don't throw things away, because you may need to recycle them or give them to somebody else. So yeah, he had a lot of trauma in his life, but he would have said it was not the fault of his growing up in the church. It was the fault of the university, the Catholic University, not accepting him and not seeing that those two things were very, very interconnected.
Wow, that's interesting. That's really deep. Thank you for sharing your story. And I feel like it's really important to a lot of people, not just Black people, but especially in the Black community. Church has always been a very important part of the recipe.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious if anybody watching or with us here has any personal experiences with religion or spirituality that they feel comfortable to share. And if you do, you can raise your hand. Yes. You can. It's okay. You can. You don't have to move. It's okay.
Well, and really, thank you for sharing your poetry with us. I haven't been to a poetry in a long time.
And you
I
are.
appreciate it. And Vernice.
What's your name, lady?
Oh, sorry, Mark. Thank you, Vernice. So my family, I call them, come from the two mainline Black conservative churches, and not necessarily Black, but in the communities that I grew up in, they were, and that's the Jehovah's Witness and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the cousins, I call them, the Warren cousins. And to this day, I'm still traumatized by the Jehovah's Witness Church that they won't attend services for people who are Seventh-day Adventists at their funerals, and even the repasts. I mean, I had my aunt who would go to her sister, because she was this particular person was adopted by my grandmother. Service, because she said she wasn't sure which God they were going to bless the food. And so it's always been that way of, and still trying to hold on to what you, because I also had other experiences, right? The Pentecostal experience and on my other side, and the Methodists and the Anglicans. So I had, and the Catholic. So I had the full run of religion, I feel, in the Caribbean, including the Pocomania, the more African center. Right? But I was just always very disturbed along the lines of the rift between the SDA and now the JW.org. A very catchy looking expression. And I love my family dearly, but it's just a very difficult place to walk between those two. And it keeps family from spending a lot of social time together. which is a shame.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's real. Like, I know families can be very divided over these beliefs, and it's painful, and yeah, that's hard. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Anybody else?
I'm Lauren, much like Kayla, grew up in the Seventh Day, cousins. So we grew up in the same churches and everything. I actually went to Seventh Day Adventist College, and that in of itself was very traumatizing. Being in a environment that is extremely religious and faults you for everything, while also being a minority.
Is it working?
Try it again.
Hello?
That's coming up on captions.
Okay, we got some thumbs up, we're back.
Okay. Sorry, Lauren. I'm so sorry.
Saying, I'm not gonna lie.
You were saying,
Oh, yeah, the church leaders are the ones that you would see out drinking in the club and all these things that they teach against, but as soon as you show up with tattoos or piercings, it's a problem, and that's something that I'm still seeing even today. Everybody's trying to figure out why all the young people, our generation, is leaving the church, and it's because we don't feel comfortable in the church. We don't feel like we can be ourselves because we were growing up in a church that was so judgmental and sent us to hell for everything, couldn't even go to the movies, as some people would think, because our guardian angels were way at the door, so there was a lot of things in the Seventh Day Adventist church that we were kept from, sheltered from, and in return, we got years worth of trauma. So
and thank you for sharing. Thank you. No pressure, but does anybody else? Oh, we have a hand raised. Is that my Aunt Marie?
Yes, it's me. Hi. First of all, I want to
Stand by, they can hear you yet.
One second.
Here we go.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
We got you.
Okay, first of all, I want to say, Kayla, I'm so proud of you, and the poem that you read was, totally awesome, and I am just so proud and excited for you for this moment. And I wanted to share that I too, grew up in the Adventist church. That was my daughter that just spoke, one of my daughters, and I wanted to just share. I too went through a lot of trauma in the church. I had a lot of different things that I had experienced, but the one thing that kept me grounded was the fact that I believed in God. I believed in the message. So even though I was traumatized by the church in itself, I had to realize and understand that it was people who were traumatizing me, not the religion, not the church, not the church building. It was the people. And even though the people should have been Christian people who treated you well and accepted you, these are still flawed human beings. And so that was something that kept me grounded. And even though I am still a part of the church, I still, I started to come away from everything that I was taught so that I could kind of relearn and re-understand the Bible for myself. So it's not that I don't believe in the church as a whole or the church in itself, but I want to know the Bible for myself. I don't want to know the Bible the way everybody else taught it to me. Because, as you were saying before, I think your name is Vernice, there were certain things that the Catholic Church taught. They are responsible for bringing the slaves over here. They conditioned us to believe in certain things, and they may not have been wrong about everything, but it's like they forced their religion on us. And a lot of the Protestant churches today have taken their doctrines from the Catholic Church. And so I don't want what I believe to come from what I learned and what I was conditioned to believe. I want to believe and understand and know God for myself. So that's where I am. So I never left the church based on, what treatment I received, because I wasn't there for them anyway. I have my own beliefs. I believe in God, and my belief in God kept me where I was.
You deeply resonate with that.
Yes.
Deeply resonate with that. I may have left that theology, but I didn't leave God, and God didn't leave me.
feel that.
So it reminds me of a Pentecostal refrain. I have not left Rome, Rome has left me. It's funny how you even, how it's still embedded in there.
That's wild. Thank you, Aunt Marie, for sharing.
I want to make one other comment too. I also learned that it wasn't just the Adventist church that were traumatizing people. People were traumatized in church just in general because people tend to be conservative and judgmental, you know, while having their own skeletons in their closet. And I've also learned that people will point fingers at you so they can hide whatever's going on with them. So, but it wasn't just the Adventist church, you know, I learned that all churches are going through those same type of things.
Sure. Thank you for saying that.
Yep.
And that's, I want to create space for anyone else who wants to share, but that does lead me into my next topic, and my next question is, did you ever lose God, and how did that go? And I guess I'll start and answer for myself. I had a period of several years after I left home and kind of started living on my own, where I didn't know if I believed in God. I didn't know if I had even wanted a spiritual practice. And I wasn't going to church, and I wasn't reading the Bible because I didn't want to stay in the same pattern that I'd been taught. I wanted to venture out and read other things and, you know, explore other paths, you know. But in that process, I did feel very depressed and very like disconnected from myself, disconnected from other people. I was very uncomfortable having conversations about God or about Jesus, or I didn't even want to hear the name Jesus. I was just like, I'm not with it. So that was really hard, and it was a very emotionally heavy time. So during that time, when I was sat on a porch one day, I wrote this next poem, which is actually the first poem that came to me for this project. And it is like a prayer. I was kind of praying, but I was praying and nobody at the time. I thought, oh, I don't know who's listening, but I'm talking. So these were the words that came to me in that moment.
Mhm.
And I realized after I had written the poem that you could read it both ways, from, you know, forward or in reverse. And that was not something I had done before. And it seemed like a really cool thing. And I was like, okay, I'll write a bunch more of these and see what happens. So this is called A Prayer in Reverse. Amen. Because all I see is space. Are you there, God? I'm tired of answering myself. I've been praying ever since I heard God was earless. When I was a child, they told me my mind was tied in knots. So I learned to tighten nooses on reality. I never could tighten my grip on believing. Maybe I just gave up. I tried to pray, but when I looked in the mirror, my face became fable. My faith looked like fiction. I started to think fear kept me faithful. Dear God, fear kept me faithful. I started to think my faith looked like fiction. My face became fable when I looked in the mirror. I tried to pray, but maybe I just gave up on believing. I never could tighten my grip on reality. I learned to tighten nooses. My mind was tied in knots, so they told me. When I was a child, I heard God was earless. I've been praying ever since. I'm tired of answering myself. Are you there, God? Because all I see is space. Amen. Thank you. So now I'm going to pose the same question to you, and I'll just repeat it. Was there ever a time where you felt like you had lost your connection to God, or perhaps felt like God had abandoned you?
Well, oddly, Kayla, I never felt that I had been abandoned by God, but I felt that the church that I was a part of was foreign and alien, and that I had no business being in there. In fact, I thought nobody had any business being in there. But we were having some conversation in preparation for this evening's discussion, and I said to you that I lived and I grew up in some very, very tough neighborhoods. I went to middle school in the South Bronx when it was literally being burnt down to the ground. But I took the subway by myself as a kid. I went all over New York. My family lived in tough neighborhoods. I lived in a tough neighborhood. I went to school in a tough neighborhood in middle school. And it was like there was a protective cloud over me. And no matter where I went or what I did, I was always safe. And something good would come out of those difficult places. But it wasn't happening for everybody. It just seemed to be happening for me, right? Lots of people that I went to school with, that I grew up with, I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're still alive. We had a heroin epidemic when I was a kid in Harlem. Then we had a tuberculosis epidemic, a strain of tuberculosis that they had no antibiotics that could treat, that was raging in the community. Then we had HIV happening to Black and brown people, but nobody wanted to acknowledge that it was happening to Black and brown people. And my mother had to tell me that there were babies being born who were HIV positive in the hospital that she worked at, Harlem Hospital, which is the big municipal hospital where I was born and where both of my parents worked. And then we had the crack epidemic, right? And all of that was impacting the place that I lived, and it devastated the communities, and it devastated people, and it took our best and our brightest from us. But nothing ever happened to me. Nothing untoward ever happened to me. I think I'm one of the few people who lived in New York for almost 40 years. I've never been robbed, never been mugged, never been accosted. Now it's a different conversation about people saying stuff to you on the street that they shouldn't be saying. That's a whole different conversation, but nothing untoward ever happened to me. And I attributed that to the grace of God, that God was with me everywhere. And even today, the most fervent prayer I pray is that God would continue to order my steps. That I don't know how I get to the places that I get to. I don't know how I show up where I show up, but I just know that there's a force, and that force comes through me, but it's not me, right? And so I didn't lose my faith, but I sure came to really fundamentally question the Catholic Church, and sought for many, many, many years. Where is my place? Where is my faith home? I knew where it wasn't, but I wandered for years trying to figure out where it was. And I shared this with you. I remember having this conversation with my dad. So my freshman year of high school, I got the scholarship to go to a very, very prestigious independent private school in New York. And the first year, third form, ninth grade, I took this class, ancient history. I always loved ancient history. And I was exposed to something called the doctrine of discovery. And I explored it a little bit more. And I was like, the doctrine of discovery? What? The Pope said what? That the Catholic Church has the right to go anywhere in the world and rape, pillage, and plunder any people, engage in human trafficking, enslavement, murder, genocide? And they have a doctrine about it in the church? Please. That Christmas, I had a Christmas dinner, I had a conversation with my dad, the devout Catholic. So I'm leaving the Catholic Church. I was 15. No, I was 14 on my way to being 15. And I said, I've decided I'm leaving the Catholic Church. And he said, oh, really? He said, you are too young to make that decision. And I said, how could we belong to a faith that made so much money and so much of its wealth and gave its whole, right to exist based on the transatlantic slave trade? How can we, as Black people, be a part of that faith? And he said, you are too young to understand. I said, I know I understand slavery. I understand that much. You ain't got to be a genius to understand that, Dad. And he said, well, you can't make this decision now. I said, so when can I make it? He said, when you're 18. I said, okay. So his birthday was the day before mine. We would always have a dinner together to celebrate our birthdays. 18th birthday, February of what year was that? 77. We're having dinner. And I said, okay, I believe I'm 18 now and I'm out. Right. And he's like, he's looking at me like, how could she possibly have remembered that? I said, I remember to the moment, to the day I'm out. Right. You can stay. I think it's crazy that you would, but I'm out. And it wasn't just that. The doctrine of discovery shook my world. I mean, it really shook my foundation. How could anybody claim to be of Christ and to be promulgating the word of God, the world around, however you received God, but believe this crazy thing called the doctrine of discovery? That really blew my mind. So I left, but then I thought they were also pretty hateful about women. I was like, maybe you ain't feeling this, Daddy, because you're a man. But as far as women are concerned, this is an oppressive set of circumstances. Now, mind you, this is a 14, 15-year-old having this conversation with their father, right? But I just couldn't. And so I searched, I wandered. I wandered until I found the home for me. And that home turned out to be Riverside Church and United Church of Christ.
Wow. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Did you feel like what were your emotions during the process of this, like exploring the options?
Well, one, I should say there was another really big influence in my life, which was the Black Panther Party. Fortunately for my mother and father, I was a little kid, right, when the Panthers were really organizing heavy. But what they were saying really resonated with me. And the Black Power movement was really coming into its own. And Harlem was a fervent place. I don't know if I shared this with you, Kayla, but when I was really little, like in elementary school, Malcolm X used to come, well, let me say this. So every other Friday, everybody got paid. City of New York, Harlem Hospital was a city hospital, everybody got paid. So all kinds of people would be outside the hospital on 135th Street, Atlantic Avenue in Harlem, selling everything under the sun because everybody got paid, right? It was the biggest employer in the community. So you could buy clothes, you could buy real estate. I'm telling you, you could buy some of everything. People would be out there selling to the people who worked at Harlem Hospital. But there was this one guy standing on this soapbox, literally standing on a soapbox, and he would always have a crowd around him. And I was too little to really understand what he was saying, but the way he was saying it, just something about it really spoke to me. And so I would start inching to where he was, right? And my mother would just about wrench my arm out of the socket, pulling me away from him because we were Catholic. And we sure weren't going to listen to no Black Muslim. It was Malcolm X. He came every other Friday. The mosque that he built, Mosque number 7, was walking distance from the hospital. But that was the biggest aggregation of Black people in the community. So he came there every other Friday, just like every other faith, trying to convert souls. He converted a whole bunch of people, trust and believe. He converted a whole bunch of people in Harlem who became members of the Nation of Islam. We would never, as Catholics, have become members of the nation. But I started questioning, why do we belong to a faith that's based in Rome? What's up with that? Right. So I'm asking all the questions that the Panther Party is asking. I'm asking them of my family, and I'm asking them of us about this faith. What about us as Italian? Just help me understand that, right? What's the Latin thing, right? Help me understand that. So my dad spoke Latin, and my mother probably spoke a little bit, but because the whole theology was in Latin at the time, everything was in Latin.
Wow.
I feel like I kind of escaped because I don't know what the hell they were saying. Right? I don't know what they were saying. I'm not scarred. I'm really not, because I don't know what they were talking about, right? But the stuff that I did take, which was the social gospel, that is the stuff that I still stand on. So I did get something good out of it, but I didn't get scarred like my parents did, like my grandparents did, right? My great-grandparents. God only knows what my grandmother, who was Haitian, experienced, because the Catholic Church in Haiti was a really exploitative, vicious thing trying to beat the African out of the Haitians who, who were the descendants of enslaved Africans who had come, and all their culture and all their history, right? So sure, she had a pretty traumatic experience, but the one positive thing about that is that they did not hand that trauma to me. They experienced it, but they did not give it to me. In fact, I was the first person in my family who was given a choice about where I would go to school. So my mother asked me in 1964, when it's time for me to start school, where did I want to go? Did I want to go to Catholic school or did I want to go to public school? And I thought about it for a minute and I said to her, well, if I went to Catholic school, I have to wear the same thing to school every day, right? She said, yes. I said, I'm going to public school. Thank you very much. Right. So when I tell you that theology was not deep in me, but the more I learned, the more intellectually I learned, the more I said, this is culturally not the place for us. This is spiritually not the place for us. I don't know where exactly that place is. I'm going to find it for myself, but this ain't the place for us. And I guess it felt like a rejection to my family. And I'm like, wake up, y'all. This ain't, the doctrine of discovery, this ain't for us. So eventually everybody left. But I was the first person to leave.
Wow. Oh, that's brave. And thank you for sharing that. I don't even know what to say. I feel a bit heavy right now because it's so, that's the history, but people don't want to talk about it. And I feel like, especially in circles where people wanna, if you're still in a church faith and you want to kind of toe the line with people in that faith, it's like, I don't know, maybe just in my conversations, I haven't really spoken to a lot of people who acknowledge that history and like the impact that it can have on people and the impact that it's had on generations. So thank you for sharing. Again, I'm going to invite anyone who is interested to share thoughts on what your background is or what your relationship to God has been, or if you personally ever felt abandoned by God. Would anyone like to share?
And let me just add, while our lens is a Christian lens, that is not the only lens, right? So there could be other experiences coming through other faith journeys that is not a Christian journey.
Very true.
I'd like to share. Can everybody hear me?
Thank you.
They cannot stand by, Teddy.
They can't hear us?
No, they can hear you. You cannot hear him. I need to switch
Oh.
the speaker. All right, go for it.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
John.
Hey guys, this is Ted. See a lot of familiar faces there. Hi Kayla. Hi Chantel. I'm Kayla's uncle. And I've had a very similar experience as Kayla and Lauren, coming from the Adventist Church. And for me, I don't feel like I totally understand the element of the just kind of the judgmentalisms and kind of the the Bible beating and things like that. I wasn't as traumatized. For me, it was kind of more of a I just felt like I was willing to read things for myself, and it's kind of like it felt like a snowball fight to me. It's like, well, if you can hurl judgments at me, I've got eyes and I can read the same book, and I promise you I can build my own snowball and throw it right back at you. So for me, one of the biggest turning points in kind of my journey is kind of realizing that religions as a whole, right, not just the Catholic religion or all the different Protestant faiths, is just realizing that much of it is doctrine based. So you have over 500, and I'm being generous. I mean, it's really thousands of different denominations within the Christian church, all coming from the same book. How does that happen if we're reading one book, right? So my journey has always been, I'm going to read this for myself and have an understanding. I won't cast the book off, and that's for me. And just because, I mean, realistically, it's such a historical document. I mean, it's ancient, right? So we have to give some kind of credit to the book and to, spirituality is a whole nother thing, and what that looks like in your spiritual walk. But, for me, it was, I wasn't so much traumatized. It was just, I can read the book. I know what it says, right? And I love the history that you shared with regards to the Roman Church and the doctrine of discovery. I'm very familiar with that. And how the Protestant churches really, they've come out of that, and it's like, this is not really what it is. This is the doctrines of men. And I mean,
Right.
there's translations, transliterations. I mean, so much to understand with regards to the Bible itself, where you've got to really, if you're going to understand it, you have to dig deep. You have to really try to understand the book, you know what I mean? And understand what it's saying and the cultural context and so many different things. So I haven't personally had the experience where I felt like, God, I've struggled with God. I've not understood things. I've asked for clarity and understanding, but I have not had the experience personally where I felt like, he's just not there for me, right? But I've definitely had the experience where what I was taught, eh, you know, not so sure about that, right? I'm gonna have to dig for a little bit for myself. And what I found is that, things that things that I've learned, from New Age communities, things that I've learned from the science communities, things that I've learned from different ideologies and different walks. Um, as you start to take all the information in, it's much easier. Or for me, it's been much easier to kind of build kind of a base and a platform for myself to say, you know what, this resonates, this makes sense. This sounds more like truth than that, right? But I have to take all the information in, and I've learned that doctrine and dogmatism, you can even throw cognitive dissonance in there, keeps you from actually exploring the vast realms of information and understanding that you can gather to really come to a strong understanding of what you believe and what resonates as true for you. So I just thought I'd share that. Kayla, I'm very proud of you. Love you.
Oh, thank you.
Hold on,
Thank you.
hold on. Lindsay wants to share. Lindsay's my wife.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for just providing this platform. Hi, Shani. It's been really very inspirational. And I just wanted to answer your question about feeling like, has God ever left me? I too, I don't know if the majority of your listeners have grew up in the Adventist church. It sounds like we have. I also grew up in the Adventist church. I went to Adventist schools from elementary to high school, from junior high to high school to even university. So it's a heavy indoctrination. And I married an Adventist husband, and we had an Adventist wedding. There was no dancing, there was no drinking. I mean, it was just really, really religious. And throughout my journey of being married and having children, I never felt that God left me. I actually felt like I was able to get a better relationship with him the moment that I decided to step away from all religion, and decide that I wanted to have a genuine relationship with God, and outside of claiming a religion or identifying myself as a religion. I tell people that I don't identify as any religion. I just believe that he exists, and I know that he's real, and he's been real in my life. I don't necessarily think that I was traumatized, but maybe that is the trauma, not being able to vocalize the things that have happened growing up in such a strict religion. I guess the trauma does come, I will say, feeling like stepping away from the Adventist religion. We've been taught that we won't be saved, right? We've been taught that we won't make it into the kingdom. And obviously, anyone that believes in God and believes in the second coming, that's the biggest thing. You want to be saved. You want to make it, And so being taught that if you're not Seventh-day Adventist, you won't make it into the religion, and also being taught that other religions were the mark of the beast, and kind of stay clear away from those religions. It is traumatizing, actually. So yeah, I guess I have been traumatized. And so stepping away from that and just saying that I didn't see in any scripture where it said that you had to be Seventh-day Adventist to be saved. I didn't read it in Revelation. I didn't read it anywhere in the Bible. So I felt like firm and confident in being able to step outside of all of that. And that is when I really had a true, authentic relationship with God. Like Teddy has says, he will spend time searching and learning about the differences and learning different languages and so many different religions. That's not my calling. That's not my journey. I don't feel like I have the time for that, raising two children, but I feel like I don't want to be a part of anything. I'm at the point in my life where I don't want to claim anything. I just want to claim that he is real. He's in my life. I see him present in everything that I do. I call on him. He's never left me. And to feel like I have to say that I am something, I have to say that I'm a religion, that causes me sadness. And that's not my truth. And so I really appreciate you again for having this platform for us to be able to share. And to answer your question, no, I don't feel like he's ever left me, but that's because I've been able to have confidence in taking the time to read his word, that he will always be there, regardless of identifying as anything.
Thank you for sharing that. That's both of you. Thank you both for sharing.
Thank you. We have a hand, but also I want to acknowledge Olivia added something to the chat. I can read it, but also Olivia, let me know if you just want to come off of mute and discuss further. Don't see the button coming on, so I'm just gonna read it. So Olivia wrote, that totally resonated with me and my faith/spiritual journey, finding pieces from various religions, wisdoms, particularly indigenous peoples, science, and schools of thought.
Same.
Yes, thank you.
And then we've got a raised hand. Feel free to come off.
Hello,
Hi.
can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Oh, hi.
Oh,
Hi, Kay-
hello.
Hi, Kayla. This is your Aunt Patience. How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good. Very proud of you. I told your mother when you were 5 you should write a book. I'm glad you finally got to it. I could tell then that you were going to be an author. I just wanted to interject. I am third generation Seventh-day Adventist. I think the ones that I've been hearing on my nieces and nephews are about fourth and fifth generation, maybe sixth. I did not go to church school from K to 12. I didn't go to church school until I went to Oakwood, which was a culture shock, not because it was a Seventh-day Adventist school, but because I was in a white environment from K through 12. So I never had a Black professor or anything. So I really enjoyed being at Oakwood. As far as my religion is concerned, I learned something at Oakwood, similar to what the lady was saying. But I sang in a quartet, and we were going to go to, you're thinking that everything's wonderful in the church when you come in, you love the Lord, and, Adventists are wonderful Christians, no matter whether they're Black or white or whatever. We were going to go to a church on a Sabbath morning because the church was a white church. And we had heard that the church didn't allow Black people to come into the church. And I was like, what? I was devastated when I heard that. And so some of the students I wasn't one of the ones to go, but some of the students actually got in a car and they went there on Sabbath morning to go to church to worship with our white brothers and sisters, and they turned them away. When I heard that, I was really shaken by that. I wasn't, I was about 17, and that really shook me. It didn't shake me out of the church, but it made me realize that it doesn't matter whether you're a white person that is in the church or a white person outside the church. Racism is real. It doesn't matter. And I came to understand that racism is a part of humanity, no matter what religion you happen to be. And so I had to go through that and really take the blinders off my young eyes and realize that not everybody in the church is a Christian, and especially down south. That happens. It happened there, but it also happens here, and it happened here in the north as well. So while it did not shake me to leave the church, it kind of woke me up to the fact that so many people who you think are Christians. You know, maybe they are Christians, but they've got a long way to go in understanding that God loves everybody. But they are prejudiced, you know, against certain groups of people in the church. But it did not shake me, nor did it shake my relationship with the Lord. Being a third generation Seventh-day Adventist, I'm kind of like Teddy. I, at 12 years of age, began to take a very keen interest in the Bible. And so I, on my own, did research and study all by myself. You know, my mother encouraged us, and she also read the Bible stories, but I was very interested in the Bible, and I wanted to know more about it, and I wanted to have a relationship with Christ. So I have grown up studying and understanding who we are as Adventists, and that we are a church of prophecy, and that the Lord is soon to come. And I have been able to have the years to see the unfolding of this thing. So I personally am happy, you know, to be a Seventh-day Adventist. One other thing I want to share with you, you were saying, you know, did you ever feel like the Lord left you? I've shared this in our Sabbath school class. I'm going to share this. Maybe it might help somebody. This is a very quick story. You do sometimes get very frustrated because when you're in college, especially I was at Andrews after I left Oakwood, graduated from Oakwood, working on my master's. And sometimes, you know, you begin to understand why some of these young people take their lives, because college is very stressful. It can be extremely stressful. And I remember sitting in my room, I had to do a paper, I had to prepare for exams, and I had to get ready for all of these things that were happening that last 2 weeks of school. And I'm like, this is terrible. You know, I'm like, this is just awful. And I literally heard a voice in my head say to me, well, this is terrible. Just kill yourself. Take your life. Just kill yourself. And I said to the voice, and this is literally what I said out loud. I said, are you crazy? This will pass one day. I'm not taking my life over this. You serious? And so I understood at that point why people get depressed in or out of the church. Adventists taking their lives too. How Satan can come in and fill that void and tell you to do something. And some people listen to it. But I'm thankful to God that I said to this satanic voice, which I knew it was, you know, are you crazy? I said it out loud. No, I'm not taking my life. And so, you know, so I have not had those kinds of experiences where I really wanted to leave the church or anything like that, because I believe, you know, where I am is the right place to be. I believe this is God's church, and I believe it is going to go through one day. So I just wanted to share that with you. And Kayla, continue to do what you're doing. Very, very, very proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being here.
Can I just build on that? Mitchell and I had the great fortune to be in a conversation today with someone who was just a font of wisdom. And one of the things she said is that sometimes we are in places where even if we ourselves are not a part of the white supremacist system, because we've been in it for so long, it manifests in us in all kinds of ways. The way we treat other people, the relationships that we have, the hierarchy that we can buy into, right? And in church, I feel like that is one of the biggest places where the supremacy has been handed down to us, but we were told it was God, and that God looked a certain way, and that God thought a certain way, and that he prides some people and some places over other people. And I, like your Uncle Theodore, also studied a lot, particularly when I started studying ancient history. And I said, well, you know, if we really want to understand Jesus, Jesus was a Palestinian Jew, right? And the Christian faith derives from the Jewish faith, right? And then there's the Coptic church, right? The ancient Christian church, which is the Egyptian and the Ethiopian church, right? Which still exists today. So we don't have a lock on this. We have this thing which is given to us from Europe, which manifests and, you know, tells us that God has blonde hair and blue eyes. And I even knew as a kid, I was like, that can't be right, right? That just can't be right. And I just asked everybody, well, so what does God look like? And nobody could answer me. Well, didn't you see the picture? I said, yeah, but he couldn't have looked like that if he lived in Egypt, right? Or if he was in the Sinai. I mean, have you seen the map? Have you seen the globe? Have you seen those people, right? They are not from Russia. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Russian people at all. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they were not European, right? And when they say Sephardic people and Sephardic Christians and Sephardic Muslims and ancient Christians, they were in Africa, right? They were in what we call the Middle East, but they were not in Europe. So I'm not taking that, right? But that the trauma that has put on people the world over, right, to adopt that ideology and that, that vision that it looks this way. So that means that most of us don't fit the vision. If we don't fit the vision, do we belong? Is this for us? And that's why I'm saying I'm not from Rome. I'm not from Italy, right? That's not my place. And that's I don't know if I would call it trauma, but I would call it a search, a lifelong search to find out, where this thing that I believe, where does it come from, right? It don't come from Italy. That I was clear about.
I will say, I think trauma is the right word for especially white supremacy and the effects of white supremacy on all people throughout history around the world. It's just a huge, huge source of trauma that is so big. I feel like we often don't think about it. It's kind of like you were saying, it's like this is a thing that was just handed down and we're all surrounded by it. And so I don't know if we would identify it as traumatic, even though it is. You're the way you think, the way you talk and interact with other people. I mean, me, myself, like being in spaces, like the thoughts that I have sometimes, I'm like, that's not me thinking that, but it's something that I adopted because I'm here and I was raised here and this is what we have and it's global.
Yeah. It's an excellent point, Kayla. You're teaching, girl. You're teaching today. It's all preaching. That's right.
We have one more hand raised free again, but I do believe we have another selected work to get through. So do we want to say that for Q&A or is it okay to take one more?
I think we can take one more hand.
Right. Oh, wait, no, just drop.
No?
Just kidding. All right.
Okay.
I thought you were done with.
It's okay.
Not yet.
I can wait till then.
You sure?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of expound on and the question that you asked about feeling if God left you.
Well, I would love to hear what you have to say.
Oh, okay, no problem. I was just gonna say that honestly, I never really felt that God left me, and I've been through a lot of different traumatic things that weren't even necessarily related to the church. And honestly, I could have, based on all the things that I have experienced in my life, I could have walked away. I could have felt like God was not there. But I used that opportunity and felt like I was drawing closer to him because of it and through it. And I feel like those things that I went through in those times in my life allowed me to have my own personal relationship with God and have a better understanding of who he is in my life. And I watched how he brought me through a lot of those things. He brought me through them. He turned a lot of things into miracles for me. And he allowed me to become a stronger person for it, a wiser and stronger person for it, and allowed me to be in a position to share my testimony and help someone else. So I believe that going through those hard things drew me closer to him. So I never really felt like he left me. I was not always happy. Sometimes I felt angry. Sometimes I had to just kind of take a step back. It felt like he was there, never felt he left.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's right on time. That's a beautiful transition into this next poem that I'm going to read. And the next, I guess, the final topic that I want to explore is just what happens when you step away from what you know, when you step away from faith, and then you find God still, even beyond whatever your previous ideas were. And like many of those of us here have said, like in my own personal experience, I found that I still had a connection to God. And even when I wanted to turn away, and even when I like felt like I didn't know, something was still there, and there was still something in me that felt like this life is bigger than what I can see and feel and what I can know from even other people. It's something that, you know, I had to reflect on and get silent with and think like, you know, and really explore something deep within myself to even be able to make peace with that. And so I'm going to share one last poem. And I think based on the conversation we have had today, quite a few of you will hopefully appreciate it. This is about my reconciliation with God in a new way. And it is like, unlike the other poems in this book, it's one where the title is actually a part of the poem. So when you read it in reverse, the title is the end. So I just want to make that note, and then I'm going to read it. This is the Creator. God is only as far off as you decide. God is every voice that tells you not to hide. God is moving, breathing, living deep inside. God is floating in the wind beneath all wings. God is flowing in the rivers and the springs. God is present in each voice that dares to sing. I am embers of creation, pieces of light. I am a cosmic fractal, a grape on a vine. I am one with all things, a child of the divine. I am that I am. I am that I am. One with all things, a child of the divine. I am a cosmic fractal, a grape on a vine. I am embers of creation, pieces of light. I am present in each voice that dares to sing. God is flowing in the rivers and the springs. God is floating in the wind beneath all wings. God is moving, breathing, living deep inside. God is every voice that tells you not to hide. God is only as far off as you decide. God is the Creator. So I feel like my last question has kind of been answered already by a lot of you here. But I'll just open it up to you, Vernice, and also to everyone. What is your relationship with God like now? And how long did it take you to make peace with your current belief system?
Wow, how long did it take me to make peace? Well, I think the thing that really touched my soul was discovering gospel music. Because we didn't, we sang, I don't know what we sang, but it wasn't in English. There were these sacred whatevers, but it didn't speak to me, right? And so this song came out. It was really the first really, really popular gospel song, "Oh Happy Day," by Walter Hawkins and the Hawkins family and the Love Alive Fellowship Choir out of Oakland. And I heard this music and I asked my mother, I was like, what is that? So let me say this. My dad used to say, there'd be none of that shouting and screaming in our house. So he was very clear about it, right? One exception, Mahalia Jackson. We could listen to Mahalia Jackson sing Christmas songs and Christmas hymns, "O Little Town of Bethlehem," and "Go Tell It on the Mountain" and others. But that was the only time that gospel music was allowed to be played in our house. And so I didn't really have any experience with that music, which to me is an expression of our faith, of our longing, of our trials and tribulations in musical form. But when I really discovered it, and then I started to study it and sing it, it changed my life. And so it was music that really helped me to figure out what my path was, As long as I could sing, as long as I could be a part of a choir, wherever I was, I found a choir. When I got to college, there was no gospel choir, so I started one. And then across the street, so I had this magical experience in college. Across the street was a magnificent church, the Riverside Church. Riverside I thought it was interdenominational, but it turns out it's United Church of Christ and American Baptist, very, very different from Southern Baptist, right? But it felt interdenominational because some of everybody in the world belonged to that church. Very progressive church. First time I ever went, I think I was 17, and the pastor was preaching about the war in El Salvador. And I was like, I think I have found the church for me. And then across the street is Union Theological Seminary. It's a very, very progressive, some would say left-leaning Protestant Baptist school of theology. And they were propagating, there was a teacher there, Dr. Cohn, who was one of the foremost thinkers in the field of liberation theology. And that's when I really knew that I had found my space. Jesus as the ultimate liberator. Oppressed people, are the people that God is fighting for and speaking to, right? And if you are not on the side of those people, then you are not on the journey, right? And between the music and that understanding of liberation theology and the liberating theology that is in the Bible, if you read it, you will understand it and feel it from that perspective. That changed my life. It absolutely changed my life. So they also had a gospel choir at Union Theological, Ebony Ecumenical Ensemble, and they let me sing. Even I wasn't a graduate student, they let me sing with them. And the choir director was the wife of, how can I not remember his name? He was the first Black pastor at the church, at Riverside Church. And his experience was in the Pentecostal church. And so the first time he preached a Christmas service, he was installed as our pastor right before Christmas, in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And he did this Christmas service. At the end of the service, he did an altar call. The church had never experienced anything like this. And the Black people got up, it's 5,000 people in the church. And the Black people got up from all the way up in the bell tower in the 4th balcony and came down from wherever we were, myself included. And we stood on line for an hour and a half. So the white folks who belonged to our church were trapped in the pews, right? They couldn't get out because we were blocking up all the aisles trying to do this altar call. And we were like, oh my God, a Black pastor with a Black theology, right? It was absolutely liberating. So I belonged to that church for 28 years until I moved to Bowie. And I've been looking for a church home ever since, because there isn't anything in my mind, in my experience, like Riverside Church. But the music and liberation theology, that was what saved me. Kayla, it gave me a path.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really appreciate, especially with the music, I think music is a very important, it connects us in a lot of different ways to a lot of different things, but especially like spiritually, I think it's super important.
Indeed.
Yes.
I have a very similar experience in terms of music. Music is probably the one thing that kept me grounded when my faith wasn't where it needed to be. So let me just start by answering your question. My faith right now is in the rebuilding stages. I really kind of decided I was non-denominational. I didn't really want to be associated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church at Andrews, crazy enough, Seventh-day Adventist college. I just felt like unless there was music involved, I didn't feel the presence of God. And that caused me to join the gospel choir on campus called DMC. And it actually is the inspiration for a few of my tattoos. Like some of the worst times of my life happened at Andrews. And the only way I got through that was from some of the songs that we sing. So I have a music note on this one, and then down my side, I have Be Still, which is Psalms 46:10. And that there was a song that we sang in DMC that had that song. And I literally sat, that and even me, I sat in my room for hours just crying, listening to those songs. And I didn't even have the strength to pray, but music is what got me back. Then some things happened, and the choir was more concerned with getting paid in their cells rather than ministering. So I left because it the praise out of it for me. They were more concerned with, oh, making a show, like raise your hands, and that's not how I worship. And I don't want to fake it for a show because that's not worship. And so once I left the choir, I didn't really feel, unless it was like church service and praise and worship, I didn't really feel like I could feel God at Andrews. And it took me coming back home and not going back and taking some time away from the church to realize that I missed the presence of God. And even to this day, like we go to church, we talk about exploring different churches. I don't really consider myself to be associated with any denomination. But the music is what really gets me into the spirit to listen. So I'm still rebuilding because it shouldn't be like that. I should be able to, experience God in worship without it just being the music. So that's why I'm saying it's in the rebuilding stages, because while we go to church and while there are good words, sometimes I still don't really feel like my relationship with God is where it needs to be.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really relate to what you were saying about, like when you said, that's not how I worship. Like, I feel like that's an important phrase because everybody worships differently and everybody's spiritual path is going to look different because we're all different people. And I feel like it's not often acknowledged how okay that is. So thank you. Would anybody else like to share?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to very quickly respond to the lady that's sitting in the chair there about Jesus not being European. We had a Revelation seminar at our church. There was a gentleman sitting in the back of the church, and he was a part of the seminar. He was from a sister church, and we started reading about Jesus in the book of Revelation. And we said, in the book of Revelation says, he has hair like wool, his legs and feet and whatever were like burnt brass. And so he turned to the picture that was in the study. And the picture in the study was a blonde, blue-eyed guy. And he put his hand up and he said to me, he said, because I was doing the seminar at the time, he said, this is not the guy that's being described in here. So, and I said, no, it's not, and I said, they need to update it. So I called Seminars Unlimited and I told them what I just said. And I said, Jesus was not a white person. And she said, I agree with you. She said, we are behind. We really need to update our materials and make them more ethnic and biblically correct. So people are beginning to really understand what the Bible is saying, what Jesus was. Jesus was not a white man. He was a man of color. So I just wanted to give that experience. So there are some people out there that are trying to correct that and portray who he really is.
Love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really good to hear.
Any other questions from anyone else?
Yeah, I said, I sit with a lot of struggles about God, and I think where I'm at now, having lived and having been in struggles, social struggles, and given how fractured the world is around religion, and including the wars around religion, that to get to a place of seeing God as spirit, seeing God as without gender, and just, having experienced what spirit can be, and the fact that it's all around you, right? And then embracing that. And so that's sort of where I'm at. And I gave up on going to church, and I've been through everything. And I always say one of my best churches is the Catholic Church, because that's spent my whole lifetime trying to get away from it. But I always go back to it because when I'm having trauma, it's a place where I can sit and meditate. And there it is. I am not looking at the images. I'm meditating and trying to be in touch with the Spirit. And I think that's also to be found in the Bible. And it, and just the whole way in which religion has made God a thing that becomes a thing that you have to find again. That's the best way I can say. And when you get to that place, it's not, it clearly is not a white God. And I often will toast, the Black Messiah. And even that I sometimes pull away from because that's sort of gendered. But I still feel that as long as you're breathing and living, you are in an evolutionary relationship in spirit. And that's sort of where I am. And I think there's textual stuff in the Bible to say that.
I agree, yeah.
So
Thank you. And I really appreciate your comment too, because I've also come to that place of just trying to envision God without the human shape and just kind of sitting with the energy of spirit.
Without race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that.
I would just say that recently, there's something about Pope Francis that really speaks to my soul. I see him, and I don't know that he's gonna. I feel like he might not expire naturally because he's taking the Catholic Church in such a dramatically opposite direction from where it's been, right? But he also apologized about 2 months ago for the doctrine of discovery on behalf of the Catholic Church. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm even hearing this, right? But I know that there are forces within the church that also can't believe that he said that out loud, right? On a global stage. But transformation is possible, right? If you want it bad enough, right? And if you seek the truth hard enough, transformation is possible, right? And he's showing me that.